Donald Trump files a notice to sue the Department of Justice for the search warrant that was conducted at Mar-a-Lago. In this notice to sue, Donald Trump claims he will be suing in the future for $100 million. We'll talk about why this is frivolous, vexatious, and just shows how desperate Donald Trump is as he continues to trail in the polls to Vice President Kamala Harris. Donald Trump's stock, Trump Media, has been tanking. It's been down massively, about 52% over the past 6 months alone. The question that I have for Michael Popok, who handled securities issues before, is, do you see shareholder lawsuits coming against Donald Trump? We'll talk about that. Also, Donald Trump filed a motion to stop the sentencing that's set to take place in the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case where Trump was convicted on 34 separate felony counts. Currently, the sentencing hearing date scheduled for September 18th. Donald Trump is requesting an adjournment of the sentencing, but not just that. Donald Trump is also requesting that the Manhattan District Attorney's office be prohibited from even filing paperwork regarding their sentencing recommendations and regarding how long they think that Donald Trump should be serving time in prison, and any of the factors regarding why Donald Trump should be serving significant prison time. We'll break that down. Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan made an order which we can somewhat decipher regarding SEPA. We'll talk about that. And also Donald Trump's financial disclosures that were required to be filed with the Federal Elections Commission, raising lots of red flags. He had to disclose as liabilities the judgments that have been entered against him, which he did in very kind of vague and ambiguous terms. There's also a number of other red flags in those disclosures that we will discuss. Michael Popok, let's bring you in. We've got a lot to discuss, so we should just get into it right away, huh?
Yeah, I love it. I think this is a great week for Kamala Harris, the Democrats going into the convention, and for criminal justice. Summer's over. I mean, not technically, but it is. You've got my favorite part. I don't think we're going to talk about it today, but I'm sure you or I or others will do hot takes on it. I know you just did one on, is the way that the stolen valor and the swift boating of Tim Walz has backfired spectacularly on Donald Trump, who decided once again to demean veterans and those that have died in honor of their country overseas and who win the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest honor you can be awarded, but not to Donald Trump. To Donald Trump, the highest honor is whatever his award is, because he likes his heroes alive, not captured, not in prison. And we're right back to where we were before, where he sullies the name of the fallen. He attacks, John Kelly, who was in the military, was his chief of staff, looked on in disgust as Donald Trump would make comments about people who were injured or wounded or died in battle. He's doing it all again, and the veterans of foreign war are firing back. I think it's great. Once again, Donald Trump stepping on his own story and having it backfire and blow up spectacularly in his face.
Well, the story that he's stepping on, like all Donald Trump stories, are lies and fiction to begin with, and dangerous WWE kind of cosplay fiction. The fact that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the right-wing media has spent weeks attacking Governor Walz because Governor Walz served 24 years in the United States military, then
18 when he went in.
Then ran for Congress, where he led the Veterans Affairs Committee and has been a staunch supporter of our troops and our veterans. And then it does raise a spotlight on Donald Trump's behavior and conduct. So like when Donald Trump was at this event in Bedminster, his own country club, he doesn't really even do a lot of campaigning anymore. He basically sits at his country club, says he's doing press conferences, gets the press to show up at his country club, only invites like hand-picked press, CNN and MSNBC and others still run it. And then they decide, oh, I guess Donald Trump's not telling the truth. Now we're going to have to stop this. But they play like 20, 25 minutes of him lying nonstop. And then this is from the event that he gave at Bedminster in the evening on Thursday. It's what you referenced. And, why I want to play this at the intersection of law and politics, though, is because Donald Trump attacks all of our institution. He attacks veterans. He attacks our troops. He attacks federal judges. He attacks the judiciary. This is the opposite of what conservative is. If conservative means conserving institutions, Donald Trump is literally the exact opposite, trying to rip it to shreds. Let's just show you Donald Trump at this Bedminster event. Let's play it.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. And they're rated equal.
He goes, they're rated equal. But what he wants to do, whether it's with that or, the way he views our judicial system, is he wants to rate equal Judge Eileen Cannons and federal judges who actually care about the law. What he wants to rate equal and create these equivalences is actually Soviet-style justice, which is not justice at all, and the American system, which for its faults is a system that works, that you and I studied and revered. And then Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans go on to the projection side of things, where they then accuse Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Walz of, oh, you're doing Soviet-style show trials of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, you invoked your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in your trial. You got all of the due process rights. You got a jury. You got a grand jury. It went through all of the steps. A unanimous jury agreed. Your lawyers got to select the jury. You're sending motions about sentencing hearing. There is all the due process in the, that exists under our system, but it just goes to show you. And that's really why I wanted to show that clip, Popok. So as you address that clip, then I'll toss it to you to pivot to this Donald Trump notice to file a lawsuit against the Department of Justice, which the very fact that he's able to do that says a lot about our system. Ain't no one filing notices to sue Vladimir Putin in Russia. Like, let's be very clear. Ain't no one filing notices to sue of Kim Jong-un. And Trump does this here, though, where there are sometimes valid reasons and notices why you would have that precursor step and then bring lawsuits to vindicate your rights. Donald Trump uses lawsuits as press releases so that he can try to take attention away from the fact that his poll numbers are crashing, that Americans are turned off by him. And so he goes, okay, I guess I got to roll out another $100 million DOJ lawsuit. Popok.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's all a diversionary tactic. He doesn't really believe that he's ever going to actually either file that lawsuit. That lawsuit will likely never see the light of day. It must have been at the moment in his Walking Dead dementia that he now has, where he's just stumbling around golf courses looking like a hollowed out human being. It must have been at that particular moment. He didn't like a news story like Kamala Harris surging, Kamala Harris now leading in all the battleground states, Kamala Harris being untouchable to him being unhinged and unable to figure out how to recalibrate against Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden. Something like that, along that way. His tank stocking, we'll talk about it later, because he decided to breach the exclusivity of that his mean tweets would only be in one place, and now he returned to Twitter, things like that. So he's like, I got an idea. What can we do? I can just see him sitting around a large boardroom with his brain trust, and that word is doing heavy lift in that sentence, and say, what can we do today to get the news cycle? I got an idea. Why don't we show that we're really happy about what Judge Cannon did in Mar-a-Lago, where she is the only person in the entirety of the American judiciary, dating back to 1974 with the United States Supreme Court, who thinks the special counsel is a figment of our imagination and doesn't really exist. and decided to get rid of the entire indictment because he's improperly unauthorized and funded, and therefore he shouldn't. The case shouldn't continue. By the way, no other judge believes that. Judge Chutkan, we'll talk about later in the DC election interference case, doesn't believe that. The Supreme Court doesn't ultimately believe that either. So she's got a big problem. But so, he decides, well, I won that. Let me sue now for malicious prosecution. And who is he suing? He's threatening to sue, he says the Department of Justice, but it's really the United States of America is the defendant on the other side, ultimately. And if he were to prevail, which he won't, it would come out of the pockets of actual taxpayers, not Donald Trump, because he doesn't really pay taxes, but you and me and everybody else will be paying this $100 million, which is a number he picked out of his backside once again. This is no different than suing Michael Cohen for $500 million, suing the Pulitzer Prize Board, suing George Stephanopoulos and ABC. Does anybody see a pattern here of vexatious litigation having no merit? Judges do, and they usually, when they get their chance to do it, they'll sanction him and his lawyers. The reason, just to do a little Patreon legal AF teachable moment, the reason he has to give us notice is because you can't, because of something called sovereign immunity and the way that governments generally can't be sued for their actions, you have to put the government on notice, whether it's local, state, or federal, in this case, the United States of America, that you're planning on suing on some grounds, and you have to give them a certain amount of time, I think it's 6 months, for them to respond to it or to make the change that you're looking for, like stroke them the check for $100 million, and then you can try to sue. But even if you sue, it's still subject to dismissal under these various doctrines that we've talked about, and I think sanctionable for whatever lawyers he's using. Now, people might be thinking, Ben, what lawyers is he using these days? Because many of them are disbarred, lost their law licenses, have been indicted, or been convicted. So which ones are they, Michael? He goes back to the well of Stephen Miller with his America First law firm, AF Law, not to be confused with our program, and pulls a lawyer out of there, and they're busy running around like gadflies, filing lawsuits and things with labor disputes and this and that in order to get attention. That's all they do. And so some lawyer there signed his name to this notice, and the number is interesting because we'll talk later on maybe about Donald Trump's having to disclose his finances, and they are a mess. They are shambles. They're shambolic. And they are not sustainable. I mean, how many books can you write in which you just take other people's notes to you and slap a title on it? How many NFT trading cards can you possibly, how many Bibles or sneakers can you, how is this sustainable against $500 million or more of judgments? So and his stock crashing. We're going to talk about all of that. That's my take on the notice. I don't think, well, let me summarize. We'll never see this lawsuit. If we saw the lawsuit, the lawyers would be sanctioned, and Donald Trump is never going to obtain $100 million from the federal government because the Mar-a-Lago case was not maliciously prosecuted, and I believe the 11th Circuit's going to turn it around.
You mentioned Stephen Miller there. Now, Stephen Miller's law firm, Stephen Miller's not a lawyer. We previously have talked about Tom Fitton's legal group. Tom Fitton is not a lawyer. So some of the main people advising Donald Trump on the law are not lawyers. That's probably a notable thing to point out, don't you think, Michael Popok, at the outset? And I'm reminded what federal Judge Middlebrook said in the Southern District of Florida when he sanctioned Donald Trump and Alina Habba about $1 million for their vexatious litigation and their filing of the frivolous lawsuit there. He was raising the red flag to the judiciary in general, basically saying, we have a rare situation here where the toolkit with which we're usually able to sanction somebody for $1 million or $500,000 or $5 million, and that has a meaningful impact on deterring conduct simply doesn't exist here, because Donald Trump just goes back to Mr. and Mrs. Magadonia, his donors, who he goes, I need you to give me money right now, and you'll join me on Trump Force 2, and we'll be able to fly together. I need you. Please give me this money right now. And they do. And then Fox normalizes the behavior. And then you have Supreme Court justices like Neil Gorsuch, right-wing Supreme Court justice, then go on Fox and basically rubber stamp this whole charade as being okay. That's why it's so important that we call out what's going on here. You mentioned the Trump media stock. We'll talk more about that now. The Trump media stock, just pull up the past 6 months of what that looks like. Down 52%. Now, the United States stock market, since Donald Trump has left office, is up around 50%. So Donald Trump's constant threats, there's going to be a Great Depression, the stock market will crash if President Biden comes into office. Our stock market is actually up about 50%. And by the way, I don't think the stock market should be viewed as a main or even lead indicator on how Americans are doing. But I'm using that because the corporate media allows Donald Trump to do that. So I'm just making this one-to-one comparison. So while the stock market is up about 50%, Trump stock is down about 52% over a 6-month period. And look, it had these earnings reports, which should be called lack of earnings reports when it comes to Trump media. What did it do, Popok? $840,000 in revenue last quarter. That's total revenue.
I think it was
840,000. That's less than what a single McDonald's, not McDonald's generally, what one McDonald's franchise makes in a quarter is significantly more than what Trump's media enterprise made in that quarter. And Trump media lost again $16-20 million again. It's lost over like this past year now about $300 million. Whenever I say lost, people always make a good point. The money's going somewhere. So when you say it's getting lost,
right,
that money's going to a place. Search for that. And trust me, we are here at the Midas Touch Network. But horrific financials. Donald Trump has continued to engage in the exact type of kind of puffery regarding Trump media and pumping, rather, that crosses, that in my opinion, kind of crosses the line. So the next question, Popok, is, are there shareholder lawsuits coming?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I got people know that I have a background. I worked on Wall Street on the legal side, kind of touched a number of these items, including SPACs and all of that. The special purpose acquisition company, the stock that you put up at $24 and falling like a stone, just to remind everybody, or for those that are new to this game, when you invest in a SPAC, every SPAC has a set unit price of $10 per unit. And so when you get into the SPAC, you get it at 10, you buy in at 10. So some people might be saying, well, it's 24 now, that's better than 10. Right. But at one point it was up to 60. And people, remember, the market's not static. And so while the original investor who bought at 10 obviously is still benefited at 24, there's lots along the continuum of new investors that come into the market at various prices. And they're crushed when let's say I bought at 45, I bought at 50. Well, now I've lost half of my money or more. Donald Trump didn't buy any of the stock. Donald Trump was given millions of shares of this stock. And so his fortunes go up and down with the gyrations of the stock price. But that, I don't care about him. I care about mom and pop, the widows and orphans and retail investors that are investing in his stock market. There is no there. This is beyond the Wizard of Oz. There's nothing behind the curtain at all in terms of a legitimate business operation engine that generates any money. There just isn't. They have 4. You were given some stats out comparing it to a McDonald's franchise. They have 4 million total active users on their social media platform. Midas Touch Network has 28 million. What's the number? 28 million views in 2 days?
Every 48 hours, we're
28
doing about
million
28 million.
every 2 days. They have 4 million a month. Okay, do the math. That's one. Two, the only asset of the company is Donald Trump, for those that want to watch him. And the exclusivity of having Donald Trump only be on his social media platform. That's their only asset. They got nothing else. They got no other better mousetrap. They got no other competitive advantage. There's nothing else. So if you wanted to see Donald Trump, you had to go and pay their money and sign up and be there on that, and be there in that ecosystem. Well, that all went out the window because candidate Donald Trump can't keep track of businessman Donald Trump, and he can't keep track of felon Donald Trump because they're all inconsistent, these positions that he's taking. So when he's helping his candidacy, or he thinks he is, he's harming his business. So he says, "Oh, I got an idea. I'll go on Spaces." Talk about day late and a dollar short. His Spaces is so like 2021. I went on Spaces with Elon Musk, and for 2 hours of where I stared at my iPhone over a desk while he droned on about something else in his world. And when I wasn't busy getting ourselves in trouble with the NLRB and attacking unions who now have a claim against Donald Trump for retaliation potentially, he was draining the stock price because now he's quote unquote returned to Twitter, returned to X. Okay, well, there goes the business model. Now, what happens? I got two things I've said in the past I'm sticking with. One is that the worst mistake Donald Trump ever made was to bring his company public and have to be regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission and ultimately by plaintiffs' law firms who sue over securities fraud. I know, and you do too, Ben, I know the plaintiffs' bar in Delaware all too well. I had to defend a number of those cases when I worked at that company that shall remain nameless. And I know all the players. They are salivating about going after Trump, particularly the independent directors, whoever they are, and Donald Trump personally, and the company for this gyration of stock price. It's all going to be in Delaware. That's where the company is incorporated. And they're going to pick Donald Trump's bones clean. I used an image on a hot take recently. Picture Donald Trump naked wearing a barrel, suspenders, and selling pencils and apples, because that's where he's heading.
You got to lead there with that imagery, Popok. You got to lead with the barrel. And
the barrel.
Picture, you almost made me throw out my coffee.
So here's the point.
Yeah.
Donald Trump thought the biggest golden goose he was going to make was the billions of dollars with Truth Social. The reality is, they're the plaintiffs' vultures, lawyers, and I mean that in a nice way, are going to pick his bones clean with these lawsuits, because every time there's a gyration in the stock price, $1, $2, $5, $10, they're going to tie it to a material misstatement that Donald Trump has made to the marketplace about something. And that misled somebody to buy stock in reliance on it, like the exclusivity of Donald Trump to only be on Truth Social. And now you and I are going to have a lot of fun when they have to do their next SEC filings about what just happened on Spaces with X and what it means for the stock price. So Donald Trump's just trying to get to September when he can start selling some of that stock. And if you thought the stock gyrated and dropped before, wait till Donald Trump and his family start flooding the market with shares, because he needs the money to pay $1 billion, what's approaching $1 billion of lawsuit penalties and fines that he has to pay. Wait, you think the 20 people will be begging for $24 in September and October? That stock's going to cut in half again, heading towards the 10 that it started at.
Well, it's kind of a game of chicken right now, right? In the sense of people who are still holding on to it are trying to, I suppose, wait for that very last moment before you get an indication that Donald Trump has unloaded some of the shares. Now, when Donald Trump unloads a certain amount of shares that reach a threshold, there's going to have to be, it's public. There's going to have to be a disclosure that he, as an insider, is dumping a certain portion of his shares. And the moment that is done, if he chooses to do that in September, and I don't think he can help himself, the moment he's able to not have this lockup period, he's going to sell right away. I think that exact day, you're going to see a massive, massive drop as everybody kind of rushes to try to unload it quickly. And then what they're going to find is that Donald Trump basically froze out their brokerage accounts by having them not keep the shares as liquid and fungible as they normally are, because Trump told his people, hey, avoid your brokers basically lending your shares for short selling. Here's how you can do it. Basically, you can give him to us, and we could basically hold him to prevent him from being short sold. So the moment that people start selling it, a lot of people who hold these shares may be calling their brokers or maybe going, hey, sell it, sell it, sell it. And they go, we can't sell it right now. You put it over here at this holding company. And they're going to go, what do you mean? And they're going to be, and then, so wait, this is, again, look, I'm not giving stock advice. Popok's not giving stock advice.
We're not roaring kitty.
We're giving you our opinions right here, but things will get very interesting there in September. Hey, Salty, show that.
Ben, before you move on, one comment. The ones that aren't going to get crushed, or for people that are wondering, are all the friends of Donald Trump. All the friends of Donald Trump are not on the equity side. They're on the debt side, meaning they lent money with really amazing terms, with convertible notes, and they're doing deals with Donald Trump to bring, the Trump TV streaming service. So when you said earlier, people remind us, well, the money went somewhere. Right. That $230 million loss, a lot of that lined the pockets of investors and friends and cronies of Donald Trump who got the benefit. That they started picking that clean even before the retail investor. But we don't care about them. We care about the retail investor. That means the people in the 401ks, and others who decided to invest in that stock for whatever reason, because Donald Trump touted it and blew it up.
In other words, hypothetically, robbing Peter to pay Paul. A lot of people lent Donald Trump money to prop this thing up from the outset. So when the initial monies were accessible from the money held in trust in the SPAC, that was basically able to cover some of the debt that was able to prop Trump media up during the SPAC process in general. So those people got money. Insiders got money. Retail investors are the ones who ultimately we were warning about years ago. And whether or not they took that warning, we will see. Show these financial disclosures, Salty, because we're going to talk about this when we get right back. One of the things I want to show you is that as liabilities, you have E. Jean Carroll's judgment listed there, the New York Attorney General civil fraud judgment listed there. You've got that property right there, which to me is always like one of the shady things, the Chicago Unit Acquisitions LLC, which we'll talk about. Let's talk about all of that and more. Let's take our first quick break of the show. But before doing that, a reminder, patreon.com/legalaf, patreon.com/legalaf. Make sure you join the conversation at patreon.com/legalaf. Michael Popok and I hold our partner and associate meetings on Zoom. You get to meet us, ask Michael Popok and myself questions. We love doing that. It also helps grow this independent media channel. It's one of the ways we grow, one of the only ways we grow. So thank you to everybody who joins that. But just share the word about Legal AF in general. That's one of the best ways you can help as well. We'll be right back after our first quick break.
Let's talk about shaving. For decades, we've been sold the idea that more blades equal a better shave. But does it really? Most of us expect some level of irritation when we shave, and that's just not right. Henson Shaving is here to change that paradigm. They've looked at the problem from a different angle. Instead of focusing on just getting a smooth shave, they're all about getting a skin-friendly shave. Their razors are designed to hold the blade steady, with less bend and wobble than traditional razors. It's like the difference between cutting with a wobbly knife and a steady one. More control, means less irritation. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonsshaving.com/legalaf to pick the razor for you and use code LEGALAF and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. 2 years free blades when you head to hensonsshaving.com/legalaf and use code LEGALAF. Most clothes are uncomfortable or too tight or never actually the size you really are, not to mention the annoyance of trying to put a good outfit together. Everyone wants to dress their best and look good at all times because, frankly, it's a confidence booster. I regularly wear Rhone when I do the podcast or on Hot Takes. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. And here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, 1/4 zips, and polos. Rhone's comfortable 4-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way. From your commute to work to your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. Rhone has truly become my favorite clothes. We're on the move a lot. Whether it's jumping from meeting to meeting or catching a flight or a dinner out, the Rhone commuter collection has never let me down. Even after I wear it all day, I still feel super fresh because of that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. Head to Rhone.com/legalaf and use promo code LEGALAF to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/legalaf and use code LEGALAF. It's time to find your corner office.
Welcome back to Legal AF. Great ad reads there, Michael Popok. It's theatrical. It's a movie. It's a really enjoyment, and you love you love those products. You love our sponsors, and in the description below, you'll see the discount codes and the links. So check that out. Let's show those financials that Donald Trump had to release in connection with the fact that he is running for the office of the presidency. This is a required disclosure. And you see there, E. Jean Carroll listed, the judgment listed as a liability. You see that the New York Attorney General civil fraud case listed as a liability in very vague terms as well. Over $50 million, which I guess is the bare minimum disclosure requirement, because it's more like $500 million and over $100 million with E. Jean Carroll when you add them all up. But okay. And then the other thing that I'll just flag for everybody is you see number 9 right there, Chicago Unit Acquisitions LLC. This one's always been, an interesting one to me because Donald Trump is the owner of Chicago Unit Acquisitions LLC, and it's listed as a liability. And I've always suspected, and again, this is an opinion, that there was some debt parking taking place, which could be not above board if Donald Trump basically took a certain amount of debt in connection with the acquisition and debt financing and servicing of the debt around his Chicago tower and the lawsuits that he filed against banks in 2008. So there was a question of, in connection with those settlements, rather than having to pay the taxes of these banks canceling the debt, did Donald Trump acquire, and I put quotes, acquire the debt and park it in an LLC that he controls so he didn't have to pay taxes on the debt forgiveness in connection with suing the banks during the 2008-2009 period where Trump's investments in Chicago were absolutely tanking And that's, part of Donald Trump's playbook. But Popok, you did a bigger hot take on everything that you were seeing there. And it's not just that page. I mean, it's all the other NFTs and and all the scammy crap and the Bibles. And then I did a take on Melania. He had to disclose Melania stuff. Melania got paid by the log cabin Republicans. Remember, like the one event she went out, and it was like, that's, okay, she did one event. She got paid $247,000 or so.
And she didn't go out. She stepped out of. She was at Mar-a-Lago.
That's what I meant. Sorry, she stepped out of her room,
took off her robe and her
the living room, and she got paid $247,000 for that speech. And then for her NFTs, she made $303,000. Now, Popok, for purported billionaires,
this is not sustainable.
What do you think?
There was a number of takeaways. First of all, the one is he's inflating assets and deflating liabilities. That sounds familiar. That's how he ended up getting a $500 million disgorgement order against him for persistent fraud in the operation of his businesses for 10 years in New York. So you have that. That's one takeaway, and I'll dive into that for a moment. Then you've got what I call the finances are in shambles. It's unsustainable. Sure, he's got some. He doesn't. Well, here's the other takeaway. It's kind of a sub takeaway. Since the fraud judgment and and a monitor, a former federal judge's monitor being placed over the companies, they've basically not done any new business. For all intents and purposes, the Trump organization, in terms of new revenue streams and new business, is out of business. It's nothing more than a family office now, keeping an eye on prior contracts, which will eventually expire for licenses, and prior real estate deals. But they're not buying any new buildings. They're not investing in any new, banks aren't investing in them. They're not able to get money currently. And so the company is sort of just running in place. Sure, it's generating some from old contracts, license deals in Dubai and Oman, Jordan, where Trump's name is splashed over a building and he gets a license fee. And sure, he's got existing assets, Doral Country Club, as you said, the country club circuit. He just moves like an MX missile through all of his country clubs. He never goes anywhere else. And when he ventures out to campaign, he goes to that great battleground state of Montana. So he goes from Bedminster to Doral Country Club to Mar-a-Lago, and that's it. And sure, these things generate revenue, but even in the disclosure, I can't tell if it's making any money. Just because something has gross revenue of a number doesn't mean fundamentally it's in the black. It depends on how much it costs to make that dollar. So he says, oh, we're up $57 million in Mar-a-Lago. We're revenue. Well, how much did you spend? If you spend 60, you're in the hole by 3 million, which isn't, man. So he doesn't want to list that. He just wants to list, again, hyperinflating assets to make himself look better. And so that's the no new business being generated, no new income streams being generated by Trump org. Again, goes to his finances are in a shambles, and they're unsustainable, and you can't reproduce them because he's not getting any new Dubai deals. He's not buying, or he's not building any more hotels that anybody wants to live in with his name on. In fact, places in New York, they're paying money to take his name off of buildings that they already live in. And then you have the unsustainability of it. As I said, how many NFTs can the guy sell? I mean, how many trading cards with him in cosplay, fireman, cowboy, astronaut, how many of those can you sell? And even the Bibles that he sold with Lee Greenwood, the country singer, it was $300,000. That's all you brought. Seriously? You sold the Bible that you also signed. I almost said authorized. That you signed, and you brought in $300,000, and nowhere on there, I couldn't find it in the pages and pages and pages of his disclosure, was the sneakers he sold out of the back of the van in Philadelphia. But selling a book that's not even, he doesn't write any of his books, but selling a book about notes to Trump, just other people's notes that you slap your name on and you sell for a few $1 million, eventually the music stops and you don't have a chair to sit in because you can't this is how he's generating new income. So he's living off of old legacy dollars. He's not generating any new real estate dollars. He's got to rely on these phony card games that he's established for cash against a looming balance sheet of over $100 million owed to E. Jean Carroll that he's going to end up paying. The bond is fine. The bond is just a bond, a security to the judgment creditor that they'll get paid. The bonding company doesn't pay the money. Donald Trump has to pay the money. So the $100 million to E. Jean Carroll running with interest, pardon me, is real. The $500 million, which has been running with interest from the New York attorney, from the attorney general case in front of Judge Engoron, is going to be fully briefed on appeal during the fall. And everyone at the time, and you and I reported on it, were like, "Oh well," but the appellate court lowered the bond amount to $175 million. That doesn't mean that's all they're going to find him liable for, or to take a blue pencil under Engoron's order. It just means that they see he's got a lot of visible assets with his name on it, and he's not the kind of guy that's going to be able to beat out all of his creditors, especially with a monitor in place. So the money was less important to them than seeing the assets and having Barbara Jones sitting on top of all of his assets and reporting back in. I think I'll leave my point on this, Ben. The next big step is for Barbara Jones, the appointed monitor, who's paid by Donald Trump, but reports as an officer of the court to Judge Engoron, and then gives public reporting so you and I can talk about it, for her to comb through these hundreds of pages of disclosures on liabilities and on assets and determine whether he is committing election fraud by falsely reporting the true state of his financial picture as required by the federal election laws, and report that back to Judge Engoron. Believe me, if he thought that he was just going to file this thing and that former Judge Barbara Jones and Judge Engoron wouldn't be interested in it, I think he's in for a rude awakening very, very soon.
Well, look, it's not a coincidence also that the reasons that he's giving these press conferences at Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster, in my opinion, he's selling access. When you join these clubs, you get to be courtside during the campaign, and you get to be there during, when all of it's happening. I did a video earlier in the morning about how for 3 or 4 minutes, Donald Trump will show up at the clubs. He will first off, he makes everybody clap for him like it's North Korea, like it's like Kim Jong-un clapping. Then he goes up to kind of the certain people and speaks to him, because he's selling access to the leader, in my opinion, of the Republican Party, because the one asset that actually is doing good at this point are the memberships to his country clubs, where he's using as his residence to kind of live in, to, also avoid taxes. And that's what's funding his lifestyle. He's raised the rates on the clubs, and that is generating huge amounts of cash.
And one more thing,
throws the events there. He then uses the campaign to,
that's it.
And then has the campaign pay for the events.
Expenses are offloaded to the campaign, meaning the donors, because he books, right? He does everything at his own locations, and so revenue's up, expenses are down. Campaign is being used for personal funds. Exactly.
And when it comes to the campaign and it comes to political action committees, they're tax exempt. They're tax exempt organizations. So the PAC isn't paying taxes. The campaign isn't paying taxes, while they're raising money for Mr. and Mrs. Macedonia with those emails that I cover in a lot of the hot takes that I do, where I show that they're a combination of weird love bombing, where Donald Trump will write, "I love you. Do you love me? There's no one who I love in this world, and it would make me so sad if I didn't hear from you tonight." Or Donald Trump saying, "You need to know tonight, this could be the last night we see each other again. They're coming for us." It's messages. It's messages like that. I want to talk about what Donald Trump's plan, though, is with all of this happening. We talked about the stock crashing and shareholder lawsuits. We talked about here these liabilities are going to catch up with him. Trump wants to push everything off. It's his playbook. Even when he's the plaintiff, he sues, and then he refuses to sit for deposition and refuses to go through the steps because he's using the lawsuit as a press release. I mean, again, if you're skeptical of what I'm saying and you're watching Legal AF for the first time and you go, "That's not true," think about it like this. Okay, so assume you're a MAGA person whose friends or family told you to watch the show and just see if, what these guys are saying on Legal AF makes sense. Well, let me break it down for you like this. So Donald Trump filed a lawsuit against Michael Cohen, about 6 months ago, 9 months ago. He sued Michael Cohen for about $300 or $500 million. Donald Trump filed the lawsuit. Donald Trump is the plaintiff. He was the one doing the suing. So he sues Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen says, okay, you're suing me. I will sit for a deposition, but Donald, you need to sit for a deposition so I can ask you the questions about the lawsuit where you are suing me, Michael Cohen. So Donald Trump then tries to avoid the deposition, and then Michael Cohen goes to the judge and says, hey, judge, he's trying to avoid the deposition, make him sit for it. So then Trump's lawyer said, no, we're not trying to avoid it. We'll sit for the deposition. And then as it gets closer to the deposition day, they say, actually, he's not available. We need to move it. And then Michael Cohen goes, all right, we'll move it 2 weeks. Donald Trump goes, okay. Then the next date of the deposition comes and Donald Trump goes, you know what? We can't do the deposition because we need to move everything till after the election. And Michael Cohen's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're the one who sued me. I didn't sue you. You sued me. Sit for your deposition so you can answer questions. Tough guy, right? You're a tough guy. Answer the questions. Donald Trump goes, no. Michael Cohen goes to the judge. The judge says, Donald, I'll give you an extra week or two. You're going to sit for a deposition. Trump's lawyers go, great. We're going to sit for a deposition. We'll absolutely sit for the deposition. Then that date comes. The day before the deposition, Donald Trump dismisses the lawsuit because he did not want to sit for a deposition. He wanted the headline that he sued Michael Cohen for $300 to $500 million. And that's just one of the ways he abuses our legal system. And it's deeper than that. Imagine all the other cases of people who have real issues that were delayed or didn't get in front of that judge because Donald Trump is playing games like that, in the federal judiciary, and then using the money from Mr. and Mrs. Magadonia, who he raises money off of, to fund these things. Donald Trump's whole strategy is delay, delay, delay. And when we get back, I want to talk about now Donald Trump is requesting a delay of the sentencing in the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case. Let's talk about that, but let's take our last quick break of the show.
The older I get, the more I find myself wanting to be more intentional about the way I live, eat, and take care of my body. Mosh, which you may have heard about on Shark Tank, was founded by Maria Shriver and her son Patrick Schwarzenegger. And they have a simple mission: to create a conversation about brain health through food, education, and research. Mosh joined forces with the world's top scientists and functional nutritionists to go beyond your average protein bar. With 10 delicious flavors, including 3 that are plant-based, each Mosh bar is made with ingredients that support brain health, like ashwagandha, lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s. Mosh is now the first and only food brand boosted with Cognizin, a premium nootropic that supplies the brain with a patented form of acetylcholine. Look, I can truly say Mosh bars taste heavenly, and I've been loving their banana bread bars. The energy boost these bad boys give me in the morning is unparalleled. With the fresh kick of energy and brain health supporting supplements in their fresh formulas, you can bet I'll be coming back to them. If you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and your brain, Mosh bars are the perfect choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/legalaf to save 20% off plus free shipping on either the Bestsellers Trial Pack or the new Plant-Based Trial Pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the Bestsellers or Plant-Based Trial Pack at moshlife.com/legalaf. Thank you, Mosh, for sponsoring this episode. AI may be the most important computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber 8x8 and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/legalaf. That's oracle.com/legalaf. oracle.com/legalaf.
Welcome back to Legal AF. Michael Popok, loving those ad reads. Again, thanks to our pro-democracy sponsors right there. All right, let's talk about Donald Trump requesting an adjournment of the sentencing in the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case. We know Trump was convicted on 34 separate felony counts. A jury of his peers, that his lawyers had the opportunity to select. All 12 of them agreed. When do you get 12 people to agree on anything? All 12 of them unanimously agreed, unanimous agreement that Trump was guilty of 34 felony counts of falsification of business records. Donald Trump tried to get the judge recused for the third time, attacking the judge's daughter. That was already rejected twice. Also, the judge received an independent ethics opinion from the State Bar of New York over a year ago, saying that there's no even basis for a recusal at all, yet alone in any reason why you should exercise your discretion for a recusal. And then Justice Merchan made it clear in a letter, because he knew where Trump was going with this, do not try to move the September 18th sentencing date. I'm not moving it. It's on. I'm going to still have to rule on Trump's motion about absolute immunity after the Supreme Court, but assuming I rule against you, Donald Trump, there and say that this case, that the case should not be retried based on the Supreme Court's absolute immunity decision, we're going to sentencing. Do not file anything to move it. So what does Trump do? He files a letter motion to move the sentencing date. Not only that, I thought your hot take just really went to the heart of the issue here, Popok, that Donald Trump was also saying, we want you, Judge, not only to move the sentencing date from September 18th to some indefinite date in 2025 in the future, but please, Judge, stop the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Please stop them from even filing anything in the first place regarding the sentencing, because it would cause reputational harm to Donald Trump if they even made a filing. Donald Trump doesn't want any reputational harm. So if the Manhattan DA lays out the conviction and why they think he should go to prison for a number of years, that will hurt Donald Trump's reputation. And what Donald Trump was arguing in this latest letter brief is that the Supreme Court was not only granting absolute immunity for core constitutional functions, official acts, and evidentiary exclusion, but Trump claimed the Supreme Court even went a step further beyond that, and they gave absolute immunity for anything that could even potentially make Donald Trump sad or hurt his reputation or hurt his ego. That absolute immunity is a reputational protection as well. It's literally in the letter brief. They argue that. Michael Popok, I want to get your take on that, and I think you just nailed it. And then why don't you pivot there on your own? You can talk about a little bit of the SEPA as you transition there.
All right, no problem. So the letter brief, the letter motion, we got a copy of it here, is how we do things in New York. We file letters, dear judge, and ask them to consider letters to be motions, and then judges send emails and letters and as orders. That's the way things happen in the Byzantine world of New York. And kind of buried on the third paragraph of their request was really what they're trying for. They're worried that because the judge has told both sides to send in their pre-sentencing memos, which is their recommendations and analysis as to what is the proper sentence for somebody that just got nailed with 34 felony count conviction. They're worried about what the Manhattan DA's office's report is going to look like, because it's going to be public. It's going to be on the docket. You and I are going to talk about it. Legal AF is going to explore it. And it's going to be a bad news day, week or beyond for Donald Trump. And they don't want that to happen. Now, the judge said, I think a little tongue in cheek, there's a chance I grant immunity on the 16th and find that and reverse and vacate the 34 count felony conviction. Wink. But I'll see you all on the 18th of September. and send in your sentencing memos. No delays there. And they didn't like that. Here's what they wrote. They wrote, the requested adjournment would prevent, they call it Danny, D-A-N-Y, we call it the Manhattan DA's office, from filing a sentencing submission while the court is still considering the presidential immunity motion. I want to talk about that for a minute, too. In an August 5th letter, Your Honor indicated that the court will issue a decision on the immunity motion on September 16th. But that the existing September 18th sentencing date remains unchanged, and that the parties should keep that in mind for purposes of sending in their sentencing recommendations as public document. However, in a July letter, the court acknowledged that the sentencing may not be necessary in light of the Supreme Court decision. I'm not quite sure that's what he meant by that. We've explained in our briefing why no sentencing should occur and why the case should be dismissed. While that is still a pending question, the Manhattan DA should not be permitted to file a public and politically prejudicial sentencing submission that will include what the Supreme Court has described as the threat of punishment in a matter, here it is, that is personally and politically prejudicial to President Trump and his family, just throw the family in there for no reason, and harmful to the institution of the presidency as a result of the type of peculiar public opprobrium associated with these proceedings that troubled the Trump court. All right, now let's break it all down. The judge is going to be sentencing on the 18th of September. I have no doubt. On the 16th of September, I believe, and I think you do too, Ben, that the judge is going to rule that the narrow issue of immunity application to this case only dealt with whether some very small stray evidence about Donald Trump's short time in the White House while he was still running the bribery scheme should not have been allowed to go to the jury under the immunity decision because it somehow rose the level of official conduct or stretched to its outer boundary official conduct. And the judge would also have to find that testimony, basically of Hope Hicks, when she entered the White House as the press secretary, and Madeleine Westerhout, who ran Donald Trump's calendar and scheduled things like the meeting with Michael Cohen to write him a private check to pay him off for the scheme, that somehow rose the level of what a president is supposed to be doing in his spare time in his office, as opposed to just being private, criminal conduct. So that's the only issue. The judge, Merchan, who sat through the entire trial and months of pretrial proceedings and hearings and briefing, knows this area of the law well. I believe he's going to say the following, that there's two reasons why I'm not vacating, meaning reversing the decision of the jury and taking away the 34 felony counts. One, the information you're talking about, the Westerhout testimony, the Hope Hicks testimony, and this evidence about what happened in the White House was not outcomes positive. It's not the reason the jury convicted on 34 felony counts against the mountain of other evidence and dozens of witnesses' testimony, including the two other components of the Trump Tower conspiracy, David Pecker of the National Enquirer and Michael Cohen, who was then your lawyer and consigliere at the time. The jury, yes, it heard the evidence, but to say that they would not have convicted on 34 felony counts unless they heard about Hope Hicks' press statements and how meetings were calendared in the White House is wrong. And secondly, even if that were the case, it doesn't require that it be stricken, that evidence, because it's beyond the outer boundaries of official conduct, and it is into the world of private conduct and criminal conduct, and therefore denied. See you 2 days from now for sentencing. That's what's going to happen. And they know that's going to happen. But what they don't need, as they're watching the political calendar, as you and I always keep one eye on here on Legal AF, while they're looking at the political calendar, they're trying to line it up and say, oh, that's going to be a terrible news week for me, Donald Trump, when that pre-sentencing report comes out. Because what people need to know here on the show is that it's just not going to be a recitation of all the evidence against Donald Trump that was presented against him. It's all of his misconduct inside the courtroom, outside the courtroom, the 10 findings of contempt, the attacks on Judge Merchan and his daughter and staff, the attacks in other places that go into sentencing. You don't just look at it in a vacuum. It's everything he did to Judge Engoron and his wife and the law clerk. It's everything he did out in front of the in the bicycle racks and these impromptu press conferences. It's all the social media. It's all the attacks on Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, with the pictures of a baseball bat next to Alvin Bragg's head. It's all the racist comments. That all goes into a sentencing memo. All that stuff that Donald Trump did as candidate Trump is only going to backfire and explode in his face as a felon Trump to be sentenced. And on the heels of that, we got kind of two things that happened right back to back in the week. Is that Donald Trump, once his first step was to try to get rid of Judge Merchan for the third time, and the only new evidence was, I don't know, that the daughter for Judge Merchan, who's an adult, who doesn't work for the court system, who has a job. Her company also fundraised for things related to Kamala Harris. So what? What does that have to do with the jury of, as you said, 12 people convicting Donald Trump for the bad things he did in 2016? Who cares how she makes a living? And how does that link to the judge who already got a clean bill of health from the Judicial Ethics Board when he wrote him a letter and said, here's what they're accusing me of. What do you think? Do I need to recuse? And they were like, no, you don't have to recuse because you made a $15 donation to Act Blue or your daughter has a job. No. And so but it just shows you how desperate and flailing they are. You said it once, I think, either last week or one of your hot takes. Donald Trump's running out of places where people have to listen to him. And the court was great because he'd show up and the media, not us particularly, but the corporate media would like ants at a picnic, would just like jump on him, and he'd get that 10-minute and that soundbite that he wanted, same ridiculous things. Now he's got to try to do it where he tricks the corporate media into showing up for a quote unquote press conference where there's no questions answered. It was just really just free media, for which, they're not supposed to be doing that, by the way, because if that looks like a campaign event instead of a Q&A, then they got to give equal time to Kamala Harris. That's why you see CNN, with the button going, we got to get out of here. This looks like a campaign stop. This isn't anything else. So you've got all of that going on. And then you've got, he's running out of these places. And so he's got to make these ridiculous filings, and he's worried. And that's where I'm going to end it. He's worried about the entire catalog of misconduct and bad behavior right at this moment in time in like September, which is not a great time when you're trying to win the presidency a couple of months later.
Finally, let's just talk briefly about what Judge Tanya Chutkan did in the SEPA Classified Information Procedure Act ruling, kind of granting in part and denying in part Trump's SEPA Section 5 request. Popok, it's confidential, so we don't really know. It's under seal, and it's pursuant to the SEPA procedures. But you did a take on this, and you thought that perhaps there's more than meets the eye there, although we haven't really seen what it is. To me, the fact that she's making SEPA Section 5 rulings in general tells me she's moving this case along as quick as she can. Everybody should recall as well, though, that we're still in this period where there was a stipulation that was entered into by Special Counsel Jack Smith and Trump to provide a little more time for Jack Smith to provide the Department of Justice's position on what the indictment's going to look like given the Supreme Court's absolute immunity ruling. But I think Judge Chutkan's signaling everything under her control, she's going to move this along quickly.
Well, I agree with that. I have a hot take up right now. It's not that hard to piece together, even though she had a one-line, my order granting in part, denying in part Donald Trump's or the government's motion to strike Donald Trump's SEPA 5 notice is sealed, because everything about SEPA is sealed. So let me just do a quickie here. but a lot of people are thinking, why are we talking about classified information? We're not talking about Mar-a-Lago, Popok. We're talking. What, have you lost your mind? We're talking about the interference with the election case in D.C. before Judge Chutkan. Yes, but Donald Trump has been telling the world and anyone who will listen, including in filings back in October, that one of his theories for defense to destroy the criminal intent, what we call mens rea for the prosecutors, is to argue that Donald Trump was really, I love this one. Donald Trump was trying to get to the bottom of Russian and Iranian election interference from 2016 and 2020. That explains all of his misconduct related to his cling to power and failure to transition peacefully. Everything from weaponizing the Department of Justice to claiming this outcome dispositive fraud when there wasn't, to claiming that dead people voted, to at the very end, after the pressure campaign against Mike Pence failed, and the use of the fake electors failed, then he just decided to burn the Capitol to the ground in order to try to stop the transfer of power. All of that can be explained because Donald Trump was actually working undercover to try to get to the bottom of presidential interference with presidential elections. I said in my hot take, I can't tell you how many criminals, when they're picked up by the FBI, they often say a version of this. Oh, no, you thought I was committing the crime. No, I wasn't committing the crime. I was working undercover to try to catch the real criminal. So what you saw is like embezzlement or arson or murder for hire. No, that wasn't that. I was working so deeply undercover that I can't even tell you who hired me to do that. And this is Donald Trump's problem. Donald Trump's saying, I was just trying to get to the bottom of 2016 collusion. First of all, I thought Donald Trump's entire argument was there was no Russia interference, and Mueller's report exonerated him, which is actually not exactly true. But now he's saying, no, I have the right as a president and a duty as a president to get to the bottom of Russia and Iranian interference. Now, look, this is mixing apples and bowling balls. Is there an Iranian plot to try to get back at Donald Trump? Yes, because the intelligence community tells me there is. Have they tried to maybe assassinate him? Maybe. Was that related to Butler, Pennsylvania, the 20-year-old kid from high school? No. But there's some truthiness in what he says, but he puts it all together as an excuse why he doesn't have criminal intent. So what Chutkan did is she's making her way through the October filings now. 2 weeks ago, she denied 2 out of the 4 pending motions to dismiss that Donald Trump had made, all filed in October. And now she's up to docket number 121, which is October 26th, when Donald Trump put the government on notice, because this is what you have to do. When you want to use classified information, which is going to be the Russian interference, Iranian interference stuff, and you want to use it, you can't just put it on the docket. You can't just use it in public, in a public trial. You have to go through, as you've done at length during Legal AF the last year, you have to go through a Classified Information Procedures Act procedure under SEPA. There is a court officer, an officer of the court who's a SEPA officer, who you have to go to them first. You have to brief the issue with them. They have high national security clearance. They go look at the documents and they make a preliminary decision, and then the judge decides. And this allows somebody who really legitimately needs to use classified information in order to clear their name. This allows them to do it so the jury gets that information, but yet the public doesn't have, our national security isn't further compromised. That's the reason for this elaborate SEPA procedures. So it starts with a notice. I want to use X, either a document that was redacted, like black tape was put on certain things. I want to use the information that's underneath the black tape. It's over redacted, or I want to use this document because I think it helps my case and helps my defense. But a judge is the gatekeeper. And what the judge has said, because she cited this particular filing as her document, as what she was responding to, is I think she's going to allow Donald Trump to see certain of the redaction on some of the documents. But she's not going to allow the Russia collusion and Iranian collusion on elections to come in as a defense to distract the jury, in order to, as a diversionary tactic to try to get a hung jury or to try to get a jury verdict in his favor. I do not believe she's going to do. We'll know more as she unseals things, but I'm piecing it together from the big pieces of the puzzle that I can see as to what I think the reality is.
Well, there you have it. Michael Popok breaking down SEPA. I gave you the handoff there. As much as I love talking about SEPA, you did a really good hot take on it. And so I thought you'd contextualize it very well and how it interplays with all of the other developments in that case. And frankly, all of the other cases taking place generally. Folks, things are moving along. And what I thought was great about today's Legal AEF in terms of the data that we have is that there's a lot of things that are moving towards kind of pivotal key moments that are really going to happen in the next 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks or so before October 1st, right? We're recording this August 17th. Between now and October 1st, I mean, you're going to have the period where Donald Trump's lockup period for Trump media is over. So Trump may start selling the stock. And imagine if that stock completely crashes, the implications there, if shareholder lawsuits happen there, what that means. And no one else is really talking about that. You don't hear corporate media letting people know, here are the steps that we think could be taking place. And that's what we've always tried to do here on Legal AF before any of these cases were even filed, before they even went to the grand jury. We were mapping out as best as we could. The analogy I often give is like a meteorologist trying to predict the weather, where these storms are brewing, where they're going, what the storms can look like, and what's developing. So that's why we wanted to cover what's developing with Trump's crashing stock. What's going to happen there? Are shareholder lawsuits on the horizon? Let's talk about these financial disclosures. What are the financial disclosures that we see red flags with? What might the financial monitor do? Stay tuned there. You know, it's why we talk about what's going to be happening with Trump's sentencing on September 18th, even though it's August 17th. It seems like the media wakes up all of a sudden. Like for those who watch corporate media, it's like all of a sudden, nothing. And then all of a sudden comes September 18th. It's like, oh, we're here. And then they want to just shout out each other versus giving real reason analysis. So what's going to be happening with the sentencing? You know, we're talking about that. What's going on in the Washington, D.C. federal criminal case? We're talking about that. So we're mapping all of these things out. We'll keep you posted every step of the way. But these things are all major developments that are happening right now. Michael Popok, great spending this time with you this weekend on Legal AF. Legal AFers, thank you for continuing to make Legal AF the top legal show in the intersection of law and politics out there, period, in the country and in the world. We're grateful for you for that. Patreon.com/legalaf, Patreon.com/legalaf. If you so feel inclined to support financially Legal AF and this network, we don't have outside investors, so one of the ways you can do that is right there, patreon.com/legalaf, and there's fun features there, including attending exclusive Zoom partnership and associate meetings. We have a lot of fun with those. Also, don't forget store.MeidasTouch.com. Some great pro-democracy gear. And while I teased it too early on the Midas Touch Brothers show, we have some great Kamala wristbands and some other incredible merch that's just been selling like crazy right there. You see the wristbands right there. Take a look at all of that gear. 100% union made, 100% made in the U.S. But for all those Legal AF fans, we've got the Legal AF shirts there. So make sure you get the bundle when you go to store.MeidasTouch.com. Get the Legal AF shirts, 100% union made, 100% made in the U.S. Bundle it with some of the wristbands. Bundle it with some of the other gear. Some great stuff there, and shout out to Jordy for really curating a great store, and shout out to Karen for doing the designs and taking the lead on that. Popok, pleasure. Legal AFers, an honor. We'll see you all soon on the next Legal AF. Make sure you're subscribed. I think we can potentially hit 3 million subscribers next week. I think we can get there next
before
week.
Labor Day. That's my prediction.
It could be next week. We'll see.
All right.
Make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Shout out Legal AF, shout out Midas Mighty.